This is Hemant.
And Jessica.
For the Friendly Atheist podcast. And we had a few topics that came up over the past couple of weeks that we knew we wanted to discuss, and we decided we would just wait till we got together and then just record the conversation. So I wanted to ask you, Jessica, to start off. You were at the Women's March in Chicago.
Yeah.
And that was last Sunday, as of this recording. What was that like for
Saturday.
you? Yeah, what was that like for you?
It was insane. It was a really, really, really awesome experience. I kind of liken it to the first time I went to, the only time I went to the Reason Rally. That sort of, there's like a
That was in 2012.
In 2012, yeah. And that was before I was writing for your blog or whatever.
In the sense that...
just like in the sense of community and camaraderie, and everybody was super kind to each other. So I have some friends who live on the north side, so I drove up with them. We took the Brown Line down, and it was packed. I lived in Chicago for 8 years, and it was the most crowded I've ever seen the trains, and every station was just wall-to-wall people. And
just to be clear, the Women's March was in support of what? Or against what?
Oh, sure. So I think there was some criticism regarding the Women's March not being focused enough, and I think in the same way that Wall Street, what was the Wall Street?
The Occupy Wall Street thing.
They weren't clear enough. But I think what it was a march in solidarity of the issues that women and people of color and other kind of minority groups are facing, and this understanding that this country is about to be run by people who could not care less about these issues that are so important to women everywhere.
And one criticism I heard from conservatives and such is that it was only about things like reproductive issues. And that's so limited to what the march was about. Yeah, that's a big part of it. But also, like you're saying, LGBT issues, it's about immigration, it's about income inequality. It was about a lot of issues, like you're saying, that the Trump people just don't seem to think about, care about. It's just not on their minds at all. And I think coming a day after the inauguration, it was kind of a show that, hey, guess what? We are still here. There's more of us than there are of you. Yeah. And we're going to be loud and vocal about it until you do something.
Yeah. It was definitely intersectional in a lot of ways. There was a lot of, just looking around at the signs, there's a lot of talk about race issues. There's a lot of talk about immigration issues. There's a lot of talk about LGBT rights, all that stuff. And I do think that, I actually had to put myself on like a Facebook blackout for 2 days, which is very unlike me. I'm always on Facebook. Because I couldn't deal with the women against the Women's March thing. With absolute sincerity, that just kind of hurt my heart in a lot of ways.
What were the reasons people, and not just women, but why were people that you were seeing against the march?
I think that women who didn't understand what we were marching for this year have a really short-sighted view of history. I think these are women who are happy with their lot in life, and therefore everybody else should be. I think it all stems from a lack of empathy or a lack of understanding, maybe, of they don't understand that women depend on their birth control, or people who are not getting paid what they're supposed to are being affected by it.
I kind of want to ask all those people who are critical of it, before you launch into your tirade about why this march was unnecessary or silly, I'm not going to listen to you or take you seriously unless you can tell me what they were marching for. Yeah, if you can answer that question, I'll listen to your criticism of it.
I think that's a good point. I think what I see a lot of is women want the government to pay for their abortions. I think honestly, like that tends to be their sort of.
That's how they condense the whole thing is about pay for my sex life or something like that. Which
is just so exhausting. And
how many times do you have to debunk that one over and over?
Right. And I'm sure we'll get to it, but when we talk about these like alternate facts and this gaslighting that's happening, it's hard because you end up having the same argument over and over, and you can't move forward and you can't progress into things that actually matter. Like it's straw man arguments. It's not helpful.
I don't know who said it. Some right-wing person was like, I call it the Million Skank March. It's like, yeah, it's the same thing we've heard over and over for many years.
Well, and this isn't a new like hot take on this, but it's just so infuriating that it's always 100%, as if women get pregnant by themselves. Like
Right.
this sort of, oh, you have the choice to open your legs. Sure. I'm not sure how policing our citizens' sex lives is part and parcel for their view of small government.
Right.
One. Two, it's not like women do it by themselves.
Right.
And to always 100% place the burden on women is so deeply unfair and infuriating.
If they actually succeeded in banning abortions or obstructing it as much as possible, the people in their churches would be affected as much as anyone else.
Yeah. Well, and also there's the whole thing that we've all said a million times of, if you really wanted to ban abortion, you would take steps to prevent pregnancy.
Right.
And the other side of that, so like that's leading up to getting pregnant. And the other side of that is, if you care so deeply about these unborn babies, quote unquote, why aren't you advocating for childhood welfare programs?
Right.
And
What are
make sure
you doing
these kids
to make sure kids have good sex education? What are you doing to give them access to contraception or
just
birth
like
control?
And
Helping kids once they're out in the world so that parents don't think, I can't take care of this kid,
Right.
or I won't be a good mother to it. It might be the best option to have an abortion.
I mean, it's definitely an issue of they're attacking the results and not the root cause. Like unwanted pregnancies, the thing is, unwanted pregnancies are always going to happen. That's just the reality of the world we live in.
It was an interesting thing. I forgot if it was the Guttmacher Institute or maybe a nonpartisan group or whatever, who said, look, we're tracking this stuff. The number of abortions in the past several years have gone down every year.
Dramatically.
But the arguments from both sides are, well, okay, why is that happening?
Right.
There's one side that says you gave them through Obamacare or whatever. We have access that we didn't have before to birth control and stuff like that. That's the reason it's going on. We're getting better at taking care of those root causes. And you had the anti-abortion side saying, no, it's because we were better at obstructing the Planned Parenthood access, things like that. So they still argue about the causes for this drop in abortion.
Yeah. I will say, and I wish I had done research on this, I heard there's a podcast I listened to called Call Your Girlfriend, which is super excellent, and I recommend it. They mentioned that, I want to say maternal death rates are way up in Texas, in places where they had trap laws. The rates of women dying in the course of giving birth are higher than they have been, and be higher than in many places in the world where we should, given our status in the world, maybe that's a thing we should have knocked out as like, make sure women can survive having a human child.
If you look at states that have like high teen pregnancy rates,
No, it's all in the Bible Belt.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's so frustrating to. I mean, it's just a matter of looking at facts and whether or not you believe science, right?
Yeah. I wish the other side would just kind of acknowledge that they just want to control your sex life.
Oh, God.
It's not about abortion, because if it was really about helping women's health care, then you're right. They would spend more time about these root causes. It's kind of like Focus on the Family, that conservative Christian group. They always say, no, we're not anti-gay. We're pro-family, things like that. So they fight against marriage equality, things like that. If you were pro-family, then you would be way more active about, stopping divorces, if that's a thing that matters to you,
right.
or focusing on adoption if you were against abortion or something. And only now, like in the past generation after Dobson, did they do anything vocal and put an emphasis on adoption, but they haven't, changed much other than that.
Yeah, and I think also the focus on anti-choice, pro-birth, whatever you want to call it.
Forced birth movement. Yes.
That's rough. Is they focus on this sort of, this one small segment of people whom they perceive to be, quote unquote, abusing abortion. So they have built up in their minds the same thing we did with like welfare queens in the 80s and 90s.
They take a couple examples and assume that's representative of everybody.
A teenager, a 20-something floozy who takes no precautions regarding her birth control and then has an abortion on, which is problematic on so many levels, because I'm going to go ahead and say people who said this have never had an abortion because guess what? Taking a pill is so much fucking easier than having to go to Planned Parenthood or whatever and get all that shit.
Abortion is not efficient
fun or
birth
easy.
Control.
It's so absurd that, I mean, it's the same idea as welfare queens. I just had family members reiterate this recently, that the idea of what about these women who are getting pregnant so they get more welfare? It's like, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's not the way to make money.
It's a terribly inefficient strategy for financial stability.
Right.
And also, even if there are a couple of people doing this, which I so deeply doubt that that's a thing.
Yeah. It's like voter fraud.
Cares?
I'm sure there's been an instance or two, but that's about it.
Right. And what?
It's not a real issue.
And why are we so focused on that when we see actual people taking advantage of government in the orders of millions and millions and millions of dollars when you're looking at corporations and things like that? Like, there's real shit happening that maybe we should worry about, but to me, I would deal with, even if half the people on welfare were like, I'm going to keep pumping out babies so I can get, which is
it doesn't happen, but even if it did, it's still a small number.
I would rather that and then deal with that shit and still have children who can eat food. Like, we live in the richest country in the world, and there are people who don't know where their next meal is coming from. There's children who are homeless, and we're like, super fine with that, but we need to make sure we end abortion.
I did hear the argument that people who, that conservatives want to cut funding to Planned Parenthood because it's like whatever, a drain on our economy or something, or cut the NEA funding, which is like nothing. And the argument, this is an old tweet from like Neil deGrasse Tyson or something, making that argument is like trying to delete text files on your 500 gigabyte hard drive. Like, it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, it's such a, and it's saber rattling. It's posturing.
Yeah.
It is
of course
making sure that people who don't know. Okay.
Let me ask you a different question about the Women's March that I had, because I really wanted your take on this, which is one of the controversies that came up at the Women's March is that they were explicitly pro-choice. And they said, no, this is part of the march. We are standing for reproductive rights. And I think they said like a anti-abortion group wanted to be a sponsor of the Women's March. And they basically said, no, we're not interested in working with you on this. And so today, as we're recording this, they're having the pro-life march or whatever in D.C. But here's the question. If it's a women's march, there are obviously a lot of women, a number of women, who are against abortion. What do you do? I mean, was it the right move to say reproductive rights and access to abortion, that is a big thing we stand for, and screw all of you who disagree with us. We don't need you. We don't want you as part of this movement. Or should there have been some way to include them and, I don't know, not take a stance on that? I mean, I don't know what the answer to that is, because philosophically, I'm with the organizers from last week. Like, no, reproductive rights is a big issue. Right. And if you exclude the women or men who are pro-life, like, that's a big issue of what we're fighting for.
Yeah, so to me, the issue of women's rights at all is so tightly connected to women's rights to decide what happened, to have ownership over their own body, that to me, and I've heard a lot of people have done I'm pro-life, like I'm pro-life for I would never have an abortion, but if somebody else, which is fine.
Which is what Tim Kaine said when he was running with Hillary Clinton.
I'm just not sure that rhetoric is helpful at this point, because I think it does just reinforce the idea that like,
there's something wrong with abortion.
Exactly. That there's something morally at least questionable about abortion. Yeah. And
I'm personally vegetarian, but I don't care if you eat meat, but I'm secretly judging you. That sort of attitude.
It is kind of the same idea. And I think that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Because I think when you say I am anti-abortion in a way that I want to legislate against it, like I think most people are anti-abortion in so much that we want to reduce the number of them, because it's by no means the most efficient way of making sure women's lives aren't interrupted.
I once said that on the blog, like we want to reduce abortion, and then I got like shit for it, because apparently that's not a thing we want to do.
You have to phrase it carefully, because it's about, if we can reduce the overall number of abortions, that's the same thing as like if we can reduce the number of C-sections, that's probably better for everybody, because
you're doing surgery.
Because you're doing surgery. Not that abortion is surgery. We understand that. Always. It can be. Fuck. I don't want to screw this one up. But I think it's saying it's giving abortion a moral character. It's saying abortion is necessarily bad, so we should reduce it. Whereas to me, it's just like not the most efficient or effective or...
It's just something that happens. It's not a morally good or bad thing.
Right.
It's just, that's it.
But
then, so again, strategically, if you're the organizers of this event, how do you handle those people who say, we want to be part of this movement because we are women, we care about women's issues, and we happen to be pro-life?
I would say fuck them.
I
don't give a shit. If you are pro-life to the point that you think it is appropriate to legislate against women's health care, whether that be birth control or abortion or anything, fuck off. Get the fuck out of here. I don't have time for that. Don't have time for that.
I've had the same conversation with organizers of atheist conferences because there are like Republican atheist groups. There are pro-life atheist groups. And like, what do you do with those groups if they say we want to have a table at your conference? We want to spread our message there.
I think
following the same rules, by the way.
Sure.
But like, do you say no to those groups?
No, I think the GOP, like being an atheist, so being an atheist first and only means you don't believe in God. And I think we'll always have to sort of have that refrain for the rest of our life. Like, being an atheist isn't a liberal or conservative point of view. It isn't anything besides, I don't believe that there is a God out there or gods, right? So that point of view can be held by somebody who is anti-government.
There are atheists who hold those conservative or views we typically associate with evangelical Christians.
Right. And I've said many, many times that I would relish the opportunity to have an actual interesting, helpful conversation regarding, okay, poverty is an issue. I think that social programs are the way to help that. If you're a fiscal conservative and you think that there are better ways to do that, yes, let's have that conversation. We're not. We're talking about whether it's moral for me to be a married woman and have contraception.
Right.
Like, that is the conversation we're still having.
What if there was a group that was against gay marriage, an atheist group that was against marriage equality or LGBT rights? I think that's a more clear-cut issue. Where, what do you say? Because this is all part of the same argument, which is they feel they are part of this larger movement, atheism, feminism, whatever.
Right.
And yet, most of the people in those tents would say, no, you're not part of this movement. What do you do with them?
Well, so let's give Reason Rally as an example. So the point of Reason Rally wasn't necessary. I mean, it's tricky because...
It is tricky.
And it's never...
Should there have been... Would if you were organizing it, and neither of us are involved in the organizing of this thing, if there was, let's say, there was someone who just died, Nat Hentoff, I think. He was a pro-life atheist columnist, recently died. Being an atheist wasn't like the primary thing on his resume, but he was. God, I hope I have his name right. But he died. If someone of his stature or someone who was well-known said, I want to speak at the Reason Rally, and it was a draw or something, but this is the position they're known for, it's something that goes against what most people in that movement feel, do you include them and say, yes, we want all kinds? Or how narrow do you make,
I don't know.
Feminism, atheism, any of these movements? Because at some point, you're going to basically exclude everybody the further down you go.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily fair to put feminism and atheism on the same thing. Because I'm more comfortable excluding people from like feminism than I am from...
On what basis?
Because feminism necessitates allowing women to make choices for themselves. And as soon as you start legislating against that and restricting that right, you are taking rights away from women. And that's the antithesis of what we're all trying to do here. Atheism is so much trickier because it has become this sort of liberal, mostly left-leaning, mostly pro-gay rights, mostly pro-choice movement. But at its core, you can't claim that. You can't say, because that becomes a very no true
You're
Scotsman.
not a true atheist.
Right, you can't do the no true...
if you're pro-life or something.
Right. And I understand how this could be read as hypocritical on my part, but I do believe that there are things that exclude people from being... Like, if you hold a certain view, you're not a feminist. But all you have to do to be an atheist is not believe in God. If you tell me you believe in ghosts and you're an atheist, I'm gonna want to talk to you more about what you believe. But like, That's your
Yeah, there
prerogative.
are atheists, by the way, and the studies have borne this out. There are atheists who believe in ghosts, who believe in miracles, who believe in the supernatural, but they call themselves atheists and they say, I don't believe in God.
Yeah.
What do you do with that group? I don't know the answer. I definitely, this is one of the reasons I just hate organizing or being a part of the organizing for these things, because those are tough calls to make, because on what basis can you say, your argument makes sense for that, for like a feminist movement, it's all about giving women control over their lives, giving them all these opportunities.
Right.
And any group that fights against that in some way, you could say, we don't want you part of this particular thing.
Atheism's much trickier.
Yeah, it's more trickier because on what basis are you saying no?
Well, and I guess actually a sort of way to turn that on its head is I would be more than happy to have, and I think we did have this at least the 2012 rally, the Raisin Rally, people who were religious but were pro-separation church and state.
Right.
So to me, that is a more reasonable stance to have. Like, whatever you believe is what you believe, the same way.
Which means that you're not even excluding them on the basis of the God thing. You're saying, come on in because you support us on these other issues.
So I guess that does sort of spin it into just sort of a
would
liberal...
Would you rather have the religious people who support church-state separation or the atheists who hold these political, social views who would that go against the majority?
I think I have more in common with the former than the latter.
Yeah.
Like... Because, I mean, again, how many times am I going to say this today? But, like, just believing in God doesn't mean shit. Like,
right. I'm not impressed.
Or not believing in God. Like,
yeah.
doesn't mean you're smarter than anybody else or more logical. It means that you... So, fine. You're an atheist. Great. Good. Wonderful. I agree with you. But, like, that doesn't mean we're going to agree on literally anything else. You know? Like, there's no... No, I don't know. It's just...
So where do you go from here? So you went to the march.
Yeah.
I wasn't available that day, but I've seen plenty about it, read about it. Like, where do you go from here? Where do we go from here? How do you translate that into something tangible that could actually lead to change?
I mean, that's been a lot of the sort of think pieces that have come out in the last week, right? Of okay, we all got out of our house and we marched, and what now? I think that people need to stay angry, and I think that they need to make sure that anger translates into something tangible. I read
which is what? Which is running for office? Which is voting on election day or midterms or
all of those things. So I think running for office is. I think the 2016 election cycle has inspired a lot of people to run for their local office, which is admirable and wonderful, and that's great. I think that's a good start. I think making people... We're putting government under a microscope now, I think, or at least left-wing individuals tend to be a little more focused on what's going on now. So I'm hoping that helps our voter turnout.
Yeah, between like Bernie Sanders getting people active and involved and these issues that are bound to come up over the next few years, the Supreme Court battle.
Right.
Like, if we can't get our shit together and vote in a particular way, and not just in liberal areas, because it doesn't matter. We already got California, you know? Like, we need you in other places to come out and vote. Then maybe something tangible can happen.
Yeah, and I think it's just keeping active, you know, canvassing for candidates you believe in, or just volunteering, or, again, donating to... your Planned Parenthood. I know on the 11th, I'm not going to be able to make it, but in Naperville, I want to say, there's going to be, they're doing some like anti-Planned Parenthood march, and some friends of mine are kind of organizing a thing.
Counter-resistance
type deal. But I do, of course, I'm worried about a burnout. I'm worried about it kind of fizzles.
I mean, it's far away. The midterms, the election, next election,
and it's
whatever.
Hard to maintain anger for that long. Although
and it's hard. It's hard to be angry all the damn time. It takes a lot.
I had this fatigue, and it's one of the other reasons. God.
I read some tweet yesterday or something that said, remember when like Pokemon Go came out for the first month? Everyone was outside and so happy. Like, I wish we were back to that.
Well, and I don't think we can be unreasonable. I don't think we can expect monthly marches on the order of what we saw.
And everyone wants to see this now. There's a scientists march being planned. There is a tax day march being planned.
Scientists march?
All of them.
Let's go to the scientist march.
We're scientists.
Yeah.
Sure.
Kind of.
But like, how many of these marches, this is what...
We're going to talk about this off mic because now I really want to go.
I mean, how many of these marches can they have that are actually effective? Because at some point, like you said, it's burnout. I mean, it takes a lot to go to D.C. For like the women's march. But if it's a one-time thing, it's like, people got there.
Yeah.
They found a reason to go there. That's awesome.
Right.
They're not going to do that every time.
No.
So... how do you sustain this movement so that it actually does something? How do you organize all these liberals to do something productive?
Well, I think the reality is that many people are going to fall away from it. That's just how it's going to be. There's no way to maintain this kind of momentum sustainably. It's unsustainable. But I think enough people have kind of had their eyes open who are willing to start exploring options locally in terms of like what they can do to help. And I know I'm just kind of spouting empty rhetoric, which isn't super helpful because I don't have examples in front of me. But I think as long as enough people stay, if not angry, aware of what's going on, I think we'll be in good shape. I'm hoping we see a rush of young women running for office. I think that would be an incredible thing to come out of this.
And it doesn't have to be for like senator or house. God, like go local, become mayor, become city council people, become like whatever, trash collector. Oh, I don't care. Just run for elected office. Run for your PTA, school board. I mean, not PTA. Run for your school board. Do something where you have a voice because it's so frustrating. I've written so many blog posts where it's like, here's what one school board member did that's batshit crazy. Yeah. I mean, in the case I just wrote about, she was outnumbered, but like, why is she on the school board? It's because she ran. And like, we didn't.
Yeah.
So more power to her, I guess. But like, that's the problem, that we just don't do stuff that the conservative side is really good at doing.
They're very good at mobilizing people. Yeah. Well, and there's also, like, you know, to kind of sort of pivot back to atheism, I think we're still at the point where anytime a non-believer runs for like any office, we're like, let's get him on the show. Like, I can't wait to, like,
there's
it feels
that few.
There's that few. And so, and I think because there are so few, it's just like this self-selecting and like vicious circle deal where there's so few and you don't want that spotlight on.
Sure.
But if a bunch of us run, then it's going to stop being a thing. Just the same way where like it used to be a huge thing of like a woman who's running for any office, and now it's at the point where it's...
One thing constructive that I did see following the Women's March is that there are these things run by, I think I've only seen it with Democrats, but they're having meetings where they're saying, if you want to run for office, we will train you so you know how to do it. Yeah. Because it's like, whoa, I will run for office, but what do you do? What paperwork do you fill out? Exactly. So they're like, no, we'll walk you through exactly what you need to do. Here's how much money it would take. Here's the names, petitions you would need. Here's the paperwork. Here's the deadlines. Here's how you do it. We'll get you started. Because obviously running a successful campaign is you need more help.
Yes.
But getting started and getting your name out there, that's kind of the first thing that I think if more people knew how to do that, they might actually know. So that's one productive step. I do want to talk more about the religion and politics thing, but is there anything else about the Women's March you wanted to bring up?
I had some numbers just to sort of just kind of give that, especially in regard to the president's obsession with crowd size.
Yes.
So according to, so this is a spreadsheet that was created by the people who organized it. And it's literally this is only part of it that I printed out.
Yeah.
Of course I have spreadsheets. I love them. So,
and that's a spreadsheet of how many people
of estimates of how many people were at various marches. So total estimates for participation was between 3.3 million and 4.6 million.
All over the country when you add them all up?
Yeah, that's all over the country, which even at its lowest, that's about 1 in 100 people. That's about 1% of the population who participated, which is bonkers.
Yeah,
that is so many people. So that's that. Some of the biggest cities, obviously Washington, D.C., between 500,000 and 1 million. These are just like low and high estimates. So the truth is somewhere in there. LA was huge, up to 75,000. New York, up to 500,000. Chicago was 250,000.
I really like that they had like Alaska, people in Alaska marching in like sub-zero
Didn't that warm your heart? Or Antarctica?
Yeah, Antarctica. They took a picture. Hilarious. That's awesome. Good for them.
But it just in regard to Chicago, I know just because I've been following it. Day of estimates were 50,000. And the week of, I was talking to the people I went to the march with, my friends Jen and Phil. we, like, every other day we'd be texting each other like, okay, the route changed. Okay, this changed. Because they kept changing it because the numbers
they
kept
had to
growing.
accommodate all those people.
And ultimately, this happened in Chicago and in D.C. I'm sure it happened elsewhere. Those are the only ones I know for sure. That they canceled the actual march portion because there was literally nowhere for us to go. Like,
you can't move. We it's a rally
go
now.
Anywhere. It was like,
that's awesome.
We all looked at a tweet that's like, we're just going to rally in place. And I was like,
just stand, march in place.
I was on Congress Parkway, just like, oh, okay, like, woo. But it was, oh my God, it was so cool. There was kids all over the place.
That's awesome.
This little girl had a sign that said women's places in the resistance, and I cried. Oh, it was so dark. It was, and it was a very warm environment. It was, first of all, physically warm. It was fucking 60 degrees in Chicago in January.
It was a good day that day.
I was wearing a tank top and a flannel, and that was it. It was the best. Like, I couldn't get over how gorgeous it was.
Yeah.
But everybody was just so kind. It was just like you're packed in shoulder to shoulder. Everyone's like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, no, you go ahead.
But you're with
like,
friends.
Yeah. I was like giving out snacks. I literally, I had brought snacks. At one point I was like, does anybody want crackers? And this woman was like, I would love crackers. So I just gave her, like,
I think
we were
the last time
buddies.
I like I said, I wasn't there on Saturday. The last time I saw something like that was when Obama won in 2008, when people in Grant Park and everything were just stunned and like so kind to each other. It was amazing. Not because you don't see that in Chicago, but that you don't see that many people
in groups
for that
being
a
nice.
cause. Yeah. That's awesome.
So yeah, those are the biggest ones. San Fran got up to 220,000. Denver showed up 200,000. Boston, Seattle. Yeah, it was in
crazy numbers everywhere.
Numbers internationally. London got around 100,000. Toronto about 60,000. Vancouver 15,000. Paris 12.
Now, if all these people could just, if all these people who were willing to attend a march and actually put investment of their time or money into this thing would be just as vocal when it comes to voting or something, instead of staying home or assuming it's in the bag or whatever.
Right. Oh, one of the biggest pushback when I was talking about like the women who were against the Women's March, one of the biggest things I saw, which just made fire come out of my...
Yes. Your whatever.
My whatever. Is that an expression?
Sure it is.
I think smoke coming out of my ears is what I was leaning toward, and I got sidetracked. But anyway, it was this woman I knew years ago when I lived in Montana. It had to be a 1,000-word rant that she copied and pasted from something else. Yeah. And it was just all about, like, if you really cared about women, you would care about women in Saudi Arabia who can't drive and blah, 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 blah. And it is... A, it's moving the goalpost. B, it's so deeply unhelpful. It's so unhelpful. It's literally like saying, like, I have the flu, and you're like, I had cancer. Like, how fucking dare you be upset? It's not helpful. And like, if
it's not like you don't care about them,
right? And if I believed a single one of these women who posted this gave a shit about women starving in Africa,
right,
I would not say anything. But
it's a George Carlin joke. Like, if you don't see any of these women being like surrogate mothers or adopting all these kids who would otherwise be aborted, you don't see them rushing in line to do that,
right? Yeah, it's super.
Yeah. Super just because something worse is happening out there doesn't mean you can't shed light on the problem in your own backyard.
I mean, it's the same thing when women talk about, like, oh, this many women are abused, and men walk in like, well, there's X amount of men who are abused. And it's like, yes, that is a thing that we should be talking about, but all you're doing is detracting from women. You're not starting your own Facebook group about, like, let's talk about men who are sexually abused, because guess what? We do need to talk about them. Yeah. But if you're just wading into my Facebook argument where I'm like, oh, I was sexually harassed, and the guy's like, one time a guy I knew had his butt squeezed. Like, okay, that's not what we're talking about right now. Right. Let's talk about that in another time in your own space. It's just fucking infuriating.
That can get annoying. Let me ask you, change topics for a second. Since we mentioned it already, there was an article that came out this week that basically said if there's one thing Trump's election taught us when it comes to the religious right, it's that
they don't give a
fuck about religion.
No.
Because there was a religious candidate on the ballot, like a devoutly religious candidate on the ballot, and it was Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And the question is, if you're like an evangelical Christian, do you vote for the, I've been married once and I stayed in a marriage even when things got hard? Do you stick with the person who like taught Sunday school whose running mate was a former missionary?
Mm-hmm.
Do you stick with the person who is personally religious?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you go with the guy who's been 3 times married, talks the way Trump does, brags about pussy grabbing, who panders to the religious right? But like, come on, even a 5-year-old knows he's faking it. He can't mention a Bible verse. He says he's read the Bible. He couldn't tell you anything about it.
No.
I mean, it's easy to see through that. And they didn't care.
Yeah.
I mean, abortion mattered way more to them than his religion did, and no matter what lip service. So the question is, if they don't care, I mean, that facade is gone.
Right.
So let's remember that in the future. Because the argument that I was reading, the argument they were making is that Democrats should not try. There's always an argument when they lose an election that they should have catered more to the religious right. They should have done more to reach out to Christians. And it's like, no, it wouldn't have worked because there's nothing. She could have been like the most pious person in the world and it wouldn't have mattered because she was a Democrat and she was pro-choice or whatever.
Yeah.
So Democrats, stop pandering to religious people. It doesn't matter. They don't care about you. They're not going to vote for you no matter what you say or do.
Right.
And the religious right doesn't actually care about religion.
No.
They care about other issues. Religion is the least of the. That's just the facade they're using to rally around, but it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah,
They're
I mean,
liars.
I think it's become abundantly clear that people who sort of walk around under the guise of their religious piety are more interested in policing morality.
Right.
Because they have
the side that cares about religious freedom only cares about their own religious freedom.
Oh my God, 100%.
freedom.
100%.
Yeah.
Because
Mike Pence is known for being a guy who said, my religion matters in Indiana, but if my religion discriminates against your rights, my religion still wins.
Yeah, what does he say? I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order.
In that order, right.
Fuck Mike Pence. By the way, as somebody who lived in Indiana for a minute, fuck that guy. Fuck
And the
guy.
sad thing is, you can't even do anything to Trump because then he'll be in charge. Like, not do anything. Like, you can't impeach the guy.
I cannot
You can't.
with
If
this.
you impeach him, it'll just get worse. Because then you'll have someone who has the same conservative views but actually knows what he's doing.
I mean, at this... okay. Okay.
Let me pivot on that for a second, which is like...
I have so many notes.
Hillary Clinton didn't really wear her religion on her sleeve, for better or for worse. You either liked her or hated her for plenty of other reasons. Bernie Sanders, he was, to me, clearly not religious in any meaningful sense of the word.
No.
He said he believed in God. He also said, I'm not part of any organized religion.
Right.
And there was a big kerfuffle when the DNC email hack showed, one random staffer at higher up basically said, should we make a big issue about this at one of the upcoming things? Because we like Hillary, not so much Bernie. Nothing happened as a result of that email, by the way. They just kind of ignored it. So it didn't have any effect on anything. But the fact that Bernie Sanders got as far as he did, being, as non-religious as he was, I think that's an awesome development in our own politics.
I wonder, though, if it would have changed, just given the people with whom he was running. Nobody was trying to out religion anybody else.
They didn't use it against him.
They didn't use it against... I mean, they never... I mean, I can't recall anybody saying, I am this because of my religion, and that's why, I'm the better candidate because
it would have been really interesting to see if Bernie Sanders had won the nomination, what would the religious right have tried to... I mean, there's plenty of stuff they could have used against Bernie Sanders that never really came up because he wasn't the candidate.
Right.
But it's not like
The
he was a
focus
perfect
was never on
candidate.
him.
But would the religious right have been like, well, he's not really religious, so you shouldn't vote? It's like, have you seen your candidates?
No, I think they would have done that. I think they would. And I also think that it would have been harder if he was running. So say he was running with the GOP field.
Who?
Sanders. I think that would have been harder for him because I think they would have targeted that more. Although they didn't with Trump. I don't...
You can't use... it was the same thing with Hillary Clinton with H. Like, you can't say she's too old for getting into office because she would have been one of the oldest presidents sworn into office because Trump is like older than she. I think he was older. Whatever. He's the same age,
70
roughly.
or something.
But it's like, yeah, you can't use the age argument because of that.
Right.
You can't use like an inexperience argument when you don't have any experience, and she was super experienced.
Yeah.
But with Bernie Sanders, you couldn't have even said he's not religious enough because all you got to do is hold up a mirror to Donald Trump, and it's like, this is your religious candidate?
Yeah.
Please.
No, and I think you're right. I think it's abundantly clear that it's not about religion. It's about
it's about all this
sort of
other stuff.
perceived morals and making sure that's...
And I would say, to add on to that, look, it's not like he said, I'm a Muslim. It's not like he said, I'm an atheist. Or I think if you said, I am not of the Christian faith, now you might get that used against you.
Sure.
But if you're like, I believe in God, that's about it.
Yeah.
It's a personal thing. I don't talk about it. I believe in some nebulous, nun-ish, like,
I wonder
there's
what would have
something out
happened
there.
if he was president. Would he have sworn in on a Bible?
He probably, I'm totally speculating here, he might have, but we have seen Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona,
Constitution,
who
right?
is the only unaffiliated member of Congress. She swore in on the Constitution. I actually don't know if she did, she wouldn't have been sworn in this time around.
Yeah.
But when she was sworn in a few years ago, she did it on the Constitution instead of the Bible, which was a wonderful gesture. Like, everyone should do that.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about when we were talking about having this episode.
Yeah. What other issue did you want to bring up?
Okay, well, I have 5 pages of notes.
Excellent.
So basically what I did, and I have to once again thank my friend Kate, who is bored at work, so she helped me do some research.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kate. So basically I just kind of did a breakdown, bullet pointed, obviously, of the first week of what we saw in Trump's first week.
Oh, God.
So this whole give it a chance thing,
Yes.
I just want to go ahead and address some of it.
Please.
So starting with the speech, which was...
His inaugural speech?
Yeah, so on... what did I do? Oh, on Inauguration Day, I actually went to like a forest preserve nearby here just to go for a run because I was like...
So you could scream and no one would hear you or something?
Yeah, I did. I was going through this is off topic, but I was listening to a podcast about Jack the Ripper because that's what I do. And I was alone, like there's nobody else. It was like 45 degrees out. It was really nice. And I looked, and I'm, walking along. Who are you kidding? And I looked to my right, and there's like a plastic fake severed arm in the tree, and scared the shit out of me.
As you're listening to Jack
As
the
I'm listening
Ripper.
to Jack the Ripper. Anyway, that's what I did. But I bring that all up to say that I didn't watch a moment of TV that day. I just couldn't. I did restart Parks and Recreation. That was my coping mechanism.
God, I watched it and it just juxtaposed that speech with any other inauguration.
Oh my God.
Like, ask not what your country can do for you. Like, American carnage in our streets.
Yeah, I knew what was going on because I got a live update from my dad and my brother who were just like texting me like, what the fuck is going on? They're so mad. So yeah, American carnage, stops here, stops now. So New York Times did a really cool annotated version of his speech. So I read it. I still haven't listened to him because his voice.
You know what it sounds like.
Yeah. So yeah, he said American carnage stops right here and now. So they kind of took pull quotes like that and said, here are the facts. So violent crime was up 4% last year, but it's been trending down for decades. So this sort of fear-mongering.
We're living in a hellhole everywhere.
This perception.
Chicago's dying.
Jesus Christ.
We're getting the feds.
Can Trump stop talking about Chicago for a minute?
No, he has to talk about every city that didn't vote for him.
Do you think oh my God. Okay. Ready for conspiracy theory?
Listening.
Do you think that he hates Chicago because he had to cancel that one rally? And now he's trying to like punish us?
No, I think if Chicago had voted for him more than it did, it was overwhelmingly Democratic, as it always is.
Yeah.
So he'll bash Chicago all day long. It didn't matter about the rally. The rally just fueled his, I already hate the city.
Okay, he mentioned the sad depletion of our military. To which Eric Schmidt, a national security reporter for the New York Times, said, the Pentagon spends about $600 billion a year on the American military, which is more than is spent in the next 6 largest world militaries combined. So this, again, it's this gaslighting effect, right?
Yeah. We're not depleting our military. He's lying to you and trying to convince you otherwise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A new national pride will stir ourselves, lift our sights, and heal our divisions, which, I hate that sentence on its construction. But there's something about this sort of nationalist dialogue that we're seeing. So, like, you know, there's patriotism and there's nationalism, and nationalism freaks me the fuck out because I don't.
We've said this before, maybe on a podcast or something, but like. We sometimes talk about the Pledge of Allegiance, and a lot of atheists don't want to say it. But like, if any other country, if Saudi Arabia said we're going to make our kids say a Pledge of Allegiance to our nation every morning, we'd be like, that's pretty messed up.
Yeah, no, it's
and when any other country, especially not an ally, is like, we're going to put our country first, and everyone else suffers or whatever. Like,
well, and that's kind of what I heard from. Some distant family member of mine who I obviously got in an argument because she was a Trump supporter because I'm calm under all circumstances. She was talking about how like we need a businessman because we need America to succeed. And I think I find that worrying because in this century more than any other time, borders between countries are less important. Yeah. Like the unification of the world is more important because of the internet and increased travel and all that stuff.
It's so weird that the same people who make this argument, we need a business expert in the White House because we need to do better on trade or whatever. Well, okay, what about science experts to do climate change? No, they don't matter.
Right.
What about diplomacy experts or people running these Ben Carson running Health and Human Housing and Urban Development.
Which is kind of the most racist thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
It said urban. He had to pick Ben Carson. But like Betsy DeVos doing education, even though she doesn't know anything about public schools.
Notes on her.
Oh yeah. But like all these, like he's picking non-experts, just political hacks he knows and likes to run these things that require expertise. I mean, the funniest thing that I read, like with Rick Perry doing Secretary of Energy,
and neither of them knew what the department did.
Oh, of course not. No, but we went from with Obama, we went from a Nobel Prize winner to a PhD in like nuclear physics to the guy who majored in like animal husbandry and got a bachelor's in that and was a cheerleader. Like that's what he's known for. Right. He's not known for energy,
right?
And he doesn't know the department.
And I think this would be a good time.
So why do you
need
a businessman in the White House who's not even good at it?
No. Well, I think there's also it's a good time to look up to what's going on in Canada when you look at his cabinet and it's like the Secretary of Education or whatever the equivalent is up there was like a former teacher and did this and like
they all know stuff.
They know stuff about it, and like I get the idea that he wants to. All he wants to do is gut these programs.
Right.
So he's putting people in place to do that. Like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Fucker.
And Republicans are just going along with it, which is I think the frustrating thing because like he's Donald Trump. Like no one's expecting him to know stuff.
Right.
But you would think a lot of these Republicans who say they're principled or whatever would actually stand up against some of no, of course not. Mm-hmm. They're not going to do that. They're going to go along with everything because they're not principled on these issues.
Absolutely not. He also said, together we'll make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again, which America's, according to Benjamin Applebaum,
columnist.
Yeah, economic policy reporter for the New York Times. America's never been wealthier. The issue, as Mr. Trump noted earlier in his speech, is that the middle class is not benefiting from the prosperity, which is accumulating disproportionately in the hands of a wealthy minority, which nothing we're seeing is changing that, right? Okay. So that was his speech.
Here's a question. Yeah. How long will it take for the people that Trump conned, the poor people who said, yeah, get rid of Obamacare. And if it does, they're the ones who are going to feel it.
Oh, it's already happening.
You know, when the tax breaks come for the rich and they're not going to see any of it. Mm-hmm. How long, if ever, when will they figure this out?
I think it's already happening. I think there's already a backlash when you see interviews with people. There was a really interesting, God, who did this? Somebody went down to like rural Kentucky to talk to people who depend on the ACA. Many of them have had healthcare for the first time in their lives and still voted for Trump. And the overwhelming answer that like of why the fuck would you do this thing? You're depending on this. Is they believed Trump when they said he would make it less expensive, even though he I think this was the problem is people were very swept up in, oh, he's going to make it better.
Right.
And
I mean, they fell
many
for
of
it.
us were, yes, many of us were concerned that he wasn't necessarily giving us structured plans, but this sort of sweeping, I'll let you know when I do it, I'll keep you in suspense sort of showmanship.
Which he's still saying, by the way, even though he's in office.
Yeah, and he is a very showmanship, like he's a fucking TV host. Like he's a showman first and foremost.
But he doesn't know anything, and he doesn't surround himself with people who know stuff. And they fell. So will they figure this out? Because how long does... I mean, I feel like they've been conned many times before. We say it about religion all the time.
Yeah.
And no amount of... If you're believing something based on bullshit,
right,
like no amount of reason is going to... As the saying goes, I can't reason you out of something you were never reasoned into in the first place.
Well, I think partially... I think it already... I think there's been a lot of people saying, oh, we didn't think he would actually take out the ACA, which was his fucking platform. So I don't know why they thought that. There was also on something happened with mortgages.
He took away their ability to like get homes.
He suspended mortgage premiums. So basically, what that means is if you get an FHA loans are used by people who maybe don't have ideal credit, maybe can't come up with the 20% down payment. And there is a percentage of kind of insurance that's on that. Obama he put in order to drop that to make mortgages more affordable to, God, I hope I'm getting this right. Oh, people are going to yell at me when I get it wrong. And Trump nixed that. And I saw a couple tweets of like, wait, how this is the opposite of what you said. This is making my life as a middle-class person harder. What the fuck are you doing? So I think we're seeing some backlash. And mostly, I think because he's coming out swinging, right? Like, it's not... I think if he had been quiet for the first couple months and then, like, quietly sort of rolled things back...
Maybe no one would have noticed.
They wouldn't have noticed. But he's just coming out fucking swinging and tackling these things right away, these executive orders that he's just, like, rocking out.
And as people are saying, focus less on the stupid things he says, because he's going to always do that.
Right.
And focus on the crazy shit he's actually doing, because that matters.
What he's doing, and God for the life, I think the one thing that I want to know more than anything else is whether he's like a secret genius or just an idiot who's like stumbling his way to the top. And I honestly at this point don't know because in this last week, he rolled out, I have 5 pages of notes of shit he did and how it's hurt people. Yeah. And when you dump all that, like...
No one can focus on any one thing.
You're zagging on us. You are zagging on us. Like, you do this, and everybody's mad for a second, and they're like, wait... Look,
See,
Betsy DeVos. Like,
I will still go with, no, he's an idiot who doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah. But the people who basically pull his puppet strings totally know what they're doing.
Yeah, I think
couple of them.
Yeah, I think the truth
And they're just like, here, you need to sign this. He doesn't know what he's signing.
No, he's not.
They just handed to him. It was funny, right before we began recording, there was a press conference with the British Prime Minister. And basically her response is, I mean, she's almost on par with him and agreeing on a lot of stuff. But like, you could hear the questions and you could hear his answers, and it seemed like the look on her face is, oh God, he's going to answer some of these questions. Like, let me take this one for him. It's kind of like Obama did with like Trudeau when he just got sworn into as Canada. Like, let me take this one before you say something stupid that you're going to regret, because I've been there. Yeah. Let me help you out.
Not my first rodeo. His obsession over the crowd size was troubling. So what I learned today doing this research is that, which I gave myself 2.5 hours to do this research, and I should have given myself a full day. Yeah. I had more, so I definitely missed things that we can always revisit. Yeah. So apparently the National Park Service hasn't released crowd sizes since 1995.
No.
The Million Man March, they got blowback because they estimated between 400 and 500,000 people were there. They got a lot of blowback for that. That said, and so I really had a hard time finding any kind of firm estimate of how many people actually showed up for Trump's thing.
Usually when they do the crowd estimate sizes for any of those big rallies, they're basing, I mean, it's not the Park Service's, because how are you going to count? You can't. They look at pictures from overhead. They can estimate based on certain sorts of things. Well, I guess
they estimate one person every 10 square feet.
Or something like that,
is what I read today. And so that's kind of how they extrapolate, which is...
But again, these are all estimates just kind of based on, this is what we know based on comparing it to other events. This is what we know based on the pictures we're looking at. But it's not the National Park Services. So all these estimates are just, they're in the ballpark.
My husband and I have been making extrapolation jokes for like 2 weeks of like, okay, how many people are in this room? 1, 2, extrapolate, like 2 million? Okay, cool. Like, perfect. It's just the funniest. It's not that funny. It's miserable. Okay, so...
you laugh because otherwise you will cry.
So Trump... threw out an estimate that from where he stood, it looked like 1.5 million people, which is the most fucking bananas statement I have ever heard in my entire... Like, Like, how do you even begin to estimate?
It was funny. There's a picture in the White House now because he showed this on ABC News.
Oh,
He's like,
the one
with the wrong date. That's of the inauguration. And of course, it's the angle of the picture is so that the whole view has people in it. But again, if you look at the overhead view, like the quarterback and a fan on the stands have very different views of what they're looking at.
Yeah. And there's that one picture that I think was taken from the Washington Monument. That's like, sorry, like this isn't. This is how. And have you seen?
This is your perspective.
With
it doesn't matter what your perspective is. Of course, you could only see people.
But there are people like some reporters going around showing pictures of the two crowds and saying like, which one do you think has more? And there are Trump supporters who are like, oh, clearly Trump has more. And it's like I don't know how to deal with that. Yeah. Okay, so
it was funny. I remember this from the Reason Rally 2016 too. That there were YouTubers who were like, I know what the crowd size is based on these pictures. It's like you weren't there. You don't know what the layout was.
Yeah, like you did one of these guys with your phone.
You had
one held it up and took a 360.
You were basing it off of one picture and you didn't know what you were talking about. Right. So your numbers mean nothing.
Well, and kind of my favorite part about this is that because estimate like pictures and stuff like that said he might have outdrawn Obama in 2013, but certainly not in 2009. Right. And I don't know why this is my favorite part, but he estimated between 1 and 1.5 million based on literally nothing. Mm-hmm. And even that insanely inflated number wouldn't have beat out Obama in 2009, which I adore that. I am obsessed with that. Like his
ballooned made up number still wasn't the reality that Obama had.
Yeah. So that was insane. So yeah, that same day
But this is what happens when you don't trust people who actually know what they're talking about. Oh my God, it's like you just make stuff up and then you believe it because you said it. Mm-hmm. Or, and again, if you keep repeating the lies, there are people out there who will believe you. That's how religion works. Yep. You just hear the story. And I mean, I've said this many times before too. Like, if you had not heard of the Jesus story growing up and it wasn't just a part of who you are, and someone came up to you for the first time and said, no, what we believe in is this guy performed miracles and then died, but then he came back to life days later, and he was born of a virgin mother, and like you would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah, but it's so ingrained in us, no matter what you believe in.
That's why
like,
born again Christians blow my mind. Like that's the one thing that
I'm
like,
started believing that on your purpose. Like
you came to that as an adult, huh? Right. All right, okay. Mm-hmm. So another good example of this sort of making up shit and running with it is
the gaslighting thing.
The gaslighting thing is that Trump believes he told congressional leaders that he lost. This is from Politico, that he lost the popular vote in November because 3.25 million undocumented immigrants voted. So.
And that number came from
his ass.
Yes.
His bright orange ass.
There you go.
So yeah, that is a really upsetting thing to hear for many reasons. Not least,
and apparently all 3 to 5 million voted against him.
Oh God,
of course.
Face planted on my microphone. Yeah, and the scarier part about. They're equally scary. I'll say this. Uh-huh. There's the one avenue of, okay, he is just training the public to just take everything he says at face value, and he doesn't need your stinking facts. Like, he will say what he believes.
He'll make up his own facts. Thank you very much.
But I think more concerning, and if this isn't, again, I still don't know if this shit is intentional or if he's an idiot. But if it is intentional, whether he said it or whether it's coming up from somebody else, it's a good way to start baiting people into accepting more voter restrictions.
Right.
So if he starts this myth of all of these illegal people,
then we need to tighten up how we vote.
Which at least 2 people who are in power right now were registered in 2 states. Have you heard this?
4 people in his family, in his inner circle. I
knew his son-in-law and...
Jared Kushner, Tiffany Trump was...
Poor Tiffany.
There was Steve Bannon, I think, was another one, and one other person. But yeah, like his own family is registered in 2 states, and that's the sort of fraud they're trying to root out.
Yep.
And the whole point is not that they're saying, oh, your family voted in 2 states. It's that this is the sort of thing, like dead people are on the voter rolls because they're dead. It doesn't mean they voted. Yeah. And it doesn't mean like these votes didn't count accurately.
I mean, it's just clinging at whatever will give him more legit, because it's very clear that he is desperately insecure about his position as a quote-unquote
He knows
legitimate
there are
president.
too many people who think he's illegitimate as a president because of Russia, because of the numbers, lost the popular vote.
Yeah.
Even though the liberals are like, no, you won the election. We're just upset about it.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing when going back to the march. Like, oh, everybody's marching because they're mad they lost. Like, no. We understand how the Electoral College. Also, I don't want to get into the Electoral College right now. That's too much for me. So that happened. The global gag rule.
Let's talk about that first. Oh, yeah, on abortion is the one you're talking about. I want to bring up something that is this idea that they basically told these scientific government-run departments, like, you can't tweet about the stuff you're doing. You can't talk about it. This gag rule on the work you're doing as scientists, we're putting a restriction on what you can talk about, which is very similar to what Canada did in like 2006 with Stephen Harper. Basically said you can't talk about your stuff with the press. It's got to go through us. It's an easy way to suppress like scientists talking about climate change and stuff.
So
can't go to conferences to present your research.
Here's what I don't know about that. I've read in a couple different. So I was gonna research that for this. What I'm reading a little bit is that it's not uncommon that during this transition phase, everybody's like, okay, cool your jets until we figure out what our next steps are and like put the proper people in place. So I'm not sure it's unprecedented. If it continues more than a reasonable time that one would take to set up their media outlets or whatever, yes. Oh my God, fucking terrifying.
Well, stuff like he removed the climate change page from the White House website or something. That is where I'm with you, because it's like, well, they took all the Obama stuff, moved it to an archived page, and yes, his White House website is pretty sparse.
Right.
So yes, will they replace that? What about all the LGBT things that are now gone too? Hopefully they'll replace it. I doubt they will, but that's the idea. But when it comes to these scientific agencies saying, nope, they told us we can't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
That's a separate issue, and that one doesn't show signs of being rescinded unless people speak up and make a big deal about it, which they are. And that's a nice, awesome resistance to kind of watch.
Yeah, it's been really, I don't want to say fun, that's a terrible word, but really interesting to watch this sort of people standing up and being like, no, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, and other journalism outlets have said, hey, scientists who say you're restricted from publishing stuff, we got your back. You send it to us, we'll get it out there for you.
Well, I think also the more, not more damaging, but equally damaging and scary is this idea of him delegitimizing news sources. Like him saying like, no, CNN, you're fake news, which, listen, we all have our issues with CNN, but like... This is like...
They're not fake news because they reported facts you don't like.
Right, exactly. And so I think that's scarier, this sort of restricted access to... I don't want to say scarier because it's all awful. I can't say that enough. But this idea that the sort of White House press corps is no longer on the front line. They're getting a very censored version. And
they always have, for what it's worth. Like, they've always gotten spin from the White House press room.
Yeah.
But this idea... I mean, Alex Jones just got a press credential, or so he says... From the White House press corps, they call first on like Fox News and like the fringe networks, and not like the Associated Press, which pulls for everybody.
Right.
Stuff like that is disturbing. That I'm not worried about because like
you're not.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. If he calls on people who are if he calls on Fox News, but they ask a good question, I don't care.
Sure.
When he starts saying like we don't want to have these briefings or you're fake news or whatever. It's so weird to watch them just be so bad at spinning stuff. Like Sean Spicer's bad at it. He's blatantly lying, even when they're calling him out on it as he speaks.
That guy.
Like, it's just, you're bad at what you do. I mean, there's a way to say an answer that is like, well, here's what the president's going for, and here's why it's not a big issue or something.
Right.
But no, they're just flat out, here's our facts.
Right.
And if you report otherwise, you're part of a conspiracy.
It's fucking insane.
The question is, how many people will fall? Again, how many people will fall for that? Like, there are people who voted for Trump because they believe the bullshit he was spouting.
Right.
They actually think he's going to make America great again. Why? Because he just said he would. Like, those people need help. And they're the ones who are likely to fall for when. And
when you say need help, you mean like they need actual social programs, not like they need mental help.
They probably need the social help. They need the benefits there. But they don't know how to think critically. They don't know that the stuff they're being fed is a lie.
Well, and I think...
They don't know how to think about that stuff.
I think the other thing that the Trump camp is doing is that they have sort of, I want to say, taken back, quote unquote, fake news. So like you said, anytime
it used to be outright bullshit.
Right.
And now it's just stuff we don't like.
Right. And that's scary. So when you see the two side-by-side pictures of the inaugurations and somebody's like, oh, that's fake news. Like, that's not what that is. And I've seen that all over my Facebook feed of just people, if I don't like it, it must not be true. And I think that's a really dangerous mindset to start to get into. So, yeah, that's fucking terrifying. Keystone Pipeline is back up and heading out. So that's pretty fun for everybody. Wednesday. Okay, so we're only on Wednesday.
And then we're on day 2.
No, I started on Friday. To be fair, I started on Friday, so now we're Wednesday. So immigration was a fun topic on Wednesday. So the wall.
Yes.
Let's talk about the wall. First of all, there's a really interesting... I don't know why this is my source for news, apparently, but College Humor did a really interesting video. I know. Hear me out. They did an interesting video with the guy who, I should have done research on this. Somebody ruins everything. Adam ruins everything.
Yeah.
I knew it was like a white guy name. And he did this a very interesting, 4-minute digestible
about how the
video
wall would
about
work.
how the wall doesn't work and how actually making it more difficult to enter and exit the country is increasing the number of people who just stay, because it used to be like, if you can go between the U.S. and Mexico with relative ease.
You don't need to rush to the U.S. to stay there illegally or something?
Well, you don't need to. The idea is, okay, if I leave the U.S. and I go back to Mexico for however long, I can come back. Whereas now that it's so hard to cross that border for a lot of people, that people are like, well, I'm going to fucking stay here because if I leave, I'm never coming back. So I thought that, anyway, we'll find out.
And I mean, John Oliver did a thing too, like the cost. Let's talk about the cost of the wall.
Cost.
It's absurd. It's going to be huge.
Mitch McConnell is saying it will estimate between 12 and 15 billion dollars.
Which, by the way, these are the same people who basically said they don't want to give aid to U.S. cities that are suffering after a natural disaster because it costs too much money, even though it was way less than this.
No.
Education will suffer. Flint doesn't even, exist anymore because of this stuff. But, no, we can't put money into that. I read somewhere the amount of money it would take to continue our international alliances with all the other countries in the world would cost way less than the cost of the wall. Which one would do a better job of protecting America?
So he's still on it. He kind of went into, we're going to pay for it from Congress, and now he's back to
Mexico's going to pay for it, but later. Sure, they will.
The Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, I think he tweeted, we're not paying for that fucking wall.
Yeah.
Get out of here with that bullshit. He went ahead and canceled that meeting with Trump that he was supposed to have.
They had a phone call this morning as we're having this. Yeah.
Okay.
It was an hour-long phone call. No one knows what happened, but Donald Trump said it was lovely, I'm sure.
Of course he said it was lovely, because he doesn't have any other words besides tremendous and lovely and great. So that's a whole city. So this strained relationship with Mexico is not something I'm looking forward to, because they are one of our top trading partners. How
many enemies can he make before, and how quickly?
Well, it sounds like he's running for a record. So the White House, so this is Thursday. I'm going to skip forward a little bit because we're talking about Mexico. So the White House has advocated 20% tax on Mexican imports, which I'm waving papers around like a crazy person. Which on its face does sound like we're making Mexico pay for it, but that's not how import taxes work. That's not what that is.
It's money we would pay for Mexican goods.
Correct. So Spicer said it's only a possibility. But
after he said, no, this is what we're doing. Oh, you all hate it? It's just one option.
We're floating up a lot of things. So Washington Post's Philip Bump, which is a dope name, he kind of did an article about what would that mean for U.S. and how would that get paid for. So if we did do a 20% import tax, He says, quote, that would certainly generate a great deal of money. Mexico is our third largest trading partner, with trade totaling more than $500 billion in 2015. The only trick is this wouldn't exactly be Mexico paying for the wall. It would be U.S. consumers paying additional costs for Mexican products like avocados, which I'm pretty upset about.
As if Chipotle wasn't expensive enough.
So looking at what the U.S. imports from Mexico, electronics, cars, fruits, vegetables, snacks, that sort of thing.
And some of this stuff is stuff poor people usually rely on, like the fruits, the vegetables, those types of foods.
Right.
Like, they're the ones who are going to get hurt by this.
As usual.
Costing more. Yeah.
As usual. So I don't know. I think that I'm very curious to see how this wall thing shakes out. I can't see it actually happening. But you know what? What else can I see happening? I couldn't see fucking Trump in the White House. How is this real life?
How much do you think the Trump sign on the wall will cost? Because it's not going to be small. That would be like the centerpiece of the wall.
Wait, repeat that question.
There's got to be like a Trump sign on the wall.
Oh, the Trump sign on the wall.
He's got to brand it
like the way he put that Trump on the Trump Tower in Chicago.
Uh-huh.
Such a pretty building before.
It was.
Ugh, fuck this. So one of the last things I want to bring up regarding events that happened this week is talking about, this is more about immigration, talking about deportation. And he's expanded who can be deported, and it is worryingly vague. So Jennifer Medina from the New York Times, he also includes, so he's expanded who is eligible for deportation. He also includes, according to language in the order, anyone who has, quote, committed acts that constitute a chargeable criminal offense, which means anybody who is accused of maybe committing a crime can be deported. They don't have to be charged. They don't have to be, yeah. And but that's regardless of whether the person has actually been charged with the crime.
Yeah.
So if there's...
Don't worry. I'm sure Trump's people will do their due diligence in trying to get to the bottom of the facts.
And it also can include anybody who uses a false social security number to obtain a job, which most illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants rather, said. Finally, he allows the targeting, it's from the same article, finally he allows the targeting of anyone who, quote, in the judgment of an immigration officer, unquote, poses a risk to either public safety or national security. That gives immigration officers the broad authority they've been pressing for and no longer requires them to receive a review from a supervisor before targeting individuals.
Great.
Which...
It was nice knowing y'all.
Oh my God, you're going to get kicked out of the country because you're brown.
I know. I'm sorry.
What about your daughter? Oh, you got an anchor baby.
Oh, yes. I knew she was good for something.
Yeah, finally. Pulling her weight around here. Yeah, so that was what I had in terms of just shit that has specifically happened on days. I also have some notes
it's just week one.
Yeah. How long have we been talking right now? Too long?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got one story for you because it happened today and it's just fresh on my mind.
So I want to talk about tax stuff.
Talk about tax stuff, then we'll get to this and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, so basically he's just obfuscating this issue of whether his taxes are important. And that's really concerning. He said to a reporter, nobody cares but you journalists about my taxes. Meanwhile, one of those We the People petitions has gotten, I think, broken a record in terms of that.
To the point that it requires the government to respond to it.
Right.
Which I'm sure they'll just say.
I don't know if that's a thing that's going to
keep up.
Yeah. Like that was an
Obama thing.
It wasn't an Obama thing. Yeah. So Kellyanne Conway on Sunday, she said that he's not going to release his tax returns, that people don't care.
Then she went back and said, "No, it's under audit. That's why he's not going to release them." Which is
not. Bullshit.
So
this is from a New York Times opinion page. Provide insight into his finances and businesses. It would reveal if he's as wealthy as claims to be, what his effective income tax rate is, as he said that he doesn't pay taxes, how much he gives to charity, which I'm going to say is...
it's very little.
Very little.
Virtually nothing.
I think my $20 donation to Planned Parenthood per month is
You have out-trumped. Yep.
Identify the sources of his income and debt, helping to answer questions about his links to businessmen, banks, governments in places like Russia and the Middle East.
This is the thing that's bothersome. Like you said earlier, he is a showman.
Yeah.
He is not a good businessman, according to business people. Mm-hmm. He just sends out his name. He doesn't build stuff. He just slaps his name on
he's a brand.
stuff. He's a brand. but he's not a good businessman.
No.
Like, it was said during the campaign too, but like other billionaires or billionaires, they don't see him as one of their own.
No.
They don't treat him like one of their own. They laugh at him. So he doesn't get the respect from like the wealthy community.
Hates it.
Uh-huh.
Ugh.
And so, I mean, the people who claim he's a good businessman,
Right.
they're not the people who know how business works.
Right.
And the people who do are like, no, he's really bad at this.
No, terrible at it.
But if you start out with millions of dollars to begin with,
Right.
you're probably going to be okay in life.
Right. I do think it's always important to remember that there's been a great deal of precedence set for releasing your tax returns. It's since the Watergate scandal in...
There are laws being proposed that say you have to release taxes. There's a lawsuit against Trump right now, which who knows how far that will go.
Yeah.
But basically the whole point of the lawsuit, it was about the emoluments clause stuff. But part of the lawsuit would say we need to look at your taxes in order to do as one way to get them.
Yeah. And I just find it really I find it weird that people don't care, because when your entire campaign was built upon, I'm a excellent businessman. I'm so good at business. I do the best business. You wouldn't believe that. I need a Trump impression. I think I need to work on that one.
No, that's pretty much it. Just say bullshit and you've done a Trump impression.
I
love that every reporter, it's like the great white whale for all of them, like getting their hands on his tax returns. They're all making pitches online like, hey, if you are someone who works at the IRS or something, here's how you could secretly, anonymously get this to us.
Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of time that it's going to be leaked.
Someone's got to be able
It's going to happen. I just don't know what the fallout of that would be. I think it could be pretty ugly for everybody.
I mean, what worries me is they could get them and it wouldn't do anything. Again, the people who are duped,
right. I think
the people who are duped by Trump, you think they're going to be swayed by like numbers and math?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's what I had. I had some stuff about the cabinet nominees, but
Week one, people. Week one. One random story, and we'll close out, which is that late last night, as we're recording this, Thursday night, there was a Texas cop from Decatur, Texas. I guess his car was parked on the side of the road. I don't know if he was pulling someone over or he was done. He was just on the side of the road. Like, tractor trailer comes by, crashes into the back of the car. Police car flips over.
Fuck.
Somehow, officer, he got airlifted to a hospital. He's released already. He's okay. He's hurt, but he's okay. So good.
Good for him.
Even the guy who was running the truck or whatever they pulled it over or whatever, or he stopped somewhere. They got him too. He's under the sheriff's office or whatever. Here's what's amazing. The Decatur Police Department told this story. They posted pictures of the crash, and like the back half of this vehicle does not exist. Shit. Like, it was ruined.
I'm just cringing for whatever the turn is going to be in this story.
I know. The turn is this. In those pictures, in the wreckage of the back half of the car, you can kind of make out the bumper of the car where it says, "In God We Trust." No. And so the comments from people who are looking at these pictures are like, God works miracles. It's like, really? Couldn't have moved the truck? Couldn't have avoided the crash? No, you see "in God," so you're like, yes, this is all part of God's plan. That it infuriates me so much. And part of what bothers me is that even if that officer had died, they would be saying the same thing. It's like, well, this is all part of God's plan. Like, God wanted to teach somebody a lesson. It's that sort of, they have to find a justification for every awful thing that happens, and they will look for signs everywhere.
Isn't that an exhausting way to live your life, though? Like, oh, I just lost my job. There must be something greater out there, which I guess I can see as optimistic.
Usually
but like when
they only do it when it's someone else's misery.
Oh, yeah, like my own shit is
like,
my
well,
fault.
this is, something big is happening here. They'll say God maybe had a hand in it, stuff. But when someone else suffers a crazy tragedy, it's like,
they brought
it's
that
part
upon
of
themselves.
it's part of God's plan. God wanted this to happen. It happened for a reason. It's so frustrating.
All of it.
On that happy note.
Yeah, wait. Okay, before we wrap up, a couple housekeeping things. So on February 10th, if you are in the Chicagoland area, we are going to be meeting up with Ross Blotcher of the Oh No, Ross and Carrie podcast. I don't have word about Carrie, but there's a Maximum Fun,
which is the network they belong to.
Which I love. So he and I are planning to meet up there if anybody wants to come out. I don't have details yet, but keep an eye out. I'll have Hemet, and you may or may not be attending depending on your life.
Yeah, I coach a team. Our playoffs start in a week, so my life ends for about 3 weeks.
So if anybody's interested in that, we'd love to say hi to you.
We'll post that information underneath the show notes for this podcast.
Yeah.
So if you go to friendlyatheistpodcast.com and for this episode, when we have that information about where Jessica and Ross might be meeting, where the conference is at, we will post that on there.
Yeah, this just might be the last time we'll record before that happens.
Yes.
So I wanted to throw that out there, and we'll get you more details as we have them. Good luck, everyone. Let us know how you're coping.
And by the way, thank you for everyone who responded to us and have sent emails saying if we ever do go on tour, they're super excited to have us.
I can't wait for us to go on tour. Where are we going to go?
Everywhere, apparently, because there's like one fan in every spot who wants us to go.
Prepare your couches, my friends. We are crashing with you.
It's going to happen. Thank you again so much. Have a good week.
Good luck, everyone.